Well, thank you, Avi, for bringing that back to what's going on in Congress and the UAP topic, because we only have the Congresswoman for, I think, 10 or 15 minutes more. I want to go back to her and then come back to you after that, Avi. And I want to ask you, Congresswoman Luna, what do you think Congress's role should be on the UAP issue? Something that doesn't get discussed enough in the discussion of the politics of UAP is that the legislative branch, and we could also say the judiciary as well, have been completely cut out of governance on the issue. Congress passes laws, not the executive branch. And for probably 80 years, Congress didn't even know this was something on which it would need to govern. So what do you see as needing to take place?
Well, first and foremost, what we're finding, again, going back to the issues that we've had with whistleblowers and people wanting to come forward, but then fearing retribution and or not wanting to give Congress information because they fear that they're going to be prosecuted for breaching security clearances, which actually in itself is also bizarre, because then you're realizing, well, how could Congress then truly provide oversight if they can't even get the information? And yet you have civilians that have the information. And so I think whistleblower protections are very big. And so we're working on that legislation, but then also to, the UAP Disclosure Act, there's a bicameral and bipartisan level of support for this. And you'll even have conversations on the floor that take place with other members that say, look, I'd like to address this, but, they are afraid. And part of the reason why I think, I was the one that was, I guess, ultimately to step up to take the mantle is because ultimately there is a fear associated with this topic. And I don't think that is there for, for no reason, right? We've had people in the past that when they talk about this, then weird things end up happening. And so ultimately for us, there needs to be an aspect of transparency, and then going back to the whole aspect of, well, the executive branch having the classification authorities, and then these agencies will house then within, whether it's the DOE, the DOD, any intelligence agency, they'll then have their own classification way of doing things. And so ultimately what we're having to do as a result of this task force is we're actually going to be going to basically the president to ask if we can get the access to programs that may exist within these different agencies. And that's because even here, people are trying to say, well, you have to go to this department or this department. So there is this overclassification, but it almost feels as if they're passing the buck and not actually wanting to give us information and give us access to these various programs. And so for us specifically, again, it is multifaceted, and we're doing this in addition to everything else taking place on the Hill, which I'm sure you can imagine one day is like a dog year. And so there's a lot going on, but we do think that it's a service that we owe the American people again. And then we are also trying to, at the same time, advocating for the release of at least the stuff that we've seen so the American people can make the decision for themselves.
Yeah, I have to say that it's been remarkable to me to watch you and Eric Burleson do as much as you're doing on this, and also to be as educated as you are on the topic. I'm an academic, so I can spend all my time on this, but I've seen both of you have show a remarkable level of understanding of this and the history of it in recent interviews. And I think people in the public know that's a very difficult thing to do when you have to manage all the responsibilities of being in Congress. Now, you just said something that I want to follow up on because I think it's very significant, and it's something that a lot of people would have missed, is you just said that you and your committee members will attempt to approach the president to get access to the program or programs in which UAP affairs are housed. Now, I'd like to ask you a question about that. From most of the contacts I have who are retired from the intelligence community that either worked on this stuff or were adjacent to it, their testimony suggests that the program or programs that deal with this are somehow legally under direct presidential control. Have you heard that testimony?
I haven't heard that testimony, but I have heard, just based on my own hunt to try to get these clearances. Because remember, as members of Congress, we should be given access to everything, right? We have the highest need to know on anything. But being able to get access to the programs is a little bit different. And so, specifically with the DOD, the Department of Energy, and ODNI, you still have the heads of these various agencies and then the agencies themselves that set the classification. But the overarching boss of that is the executive branch, thus the President of the United States. And so because of the fact that we have, and it feels like we've been blockaded on many efforts, we are going all the way up to the top. And I will say that, there aren't a lot of members of Congress again, that are willing to, push forward in this effort. But Representative Burleson, Representative Burchett, even Representative Crane have been very helpful in all of this. And so that is what we're trying to do. The executive branch specifically actually did give permission to Eric Burleson to set up a codel to Area 51. Now, do I think Area 51 is housing anything currently? No. But I will say that we have heard testimony from pilots that have stated and that they've seen weird things happening over there. And so what's been interesting about all this as well is that there do seem to be these hot spots and reporting that we've come across in which these things tend to pop in and out of. And so for us, from a congressional perspective, I'm not saying that these things are little green men, but what I am saying is it's definitely something that we need to look into and to take seriously. And I'm not the only one that thinks that either. I'm just the only one that's going public about it.
Yeah, we know that there are many people in Congress that take this seriously, but are saying a lot less publicly than one would expect, given the gravity of the issue. What do you want to see happen, let's say, over the next 5 years on the issue? I mean, there are calls for full disclosure. There are calls for a more gradual, incremental process. There's a need for further legislation. There's a need for Congress to understand this is something for it to govern. I mean, what's your ideal scenario over five years on this?
My ideal scenario would be to house a website where all the information that we're being shown or information that comes in, whether it's on military equipment that can be declassified, can be housed for the American people to go to and find. This whole idea, information might be out there publicly. Well, where do people go to find it? They make it so difficult to find. And then also going back to what I found to be a really interesting disinformation campaign that I'm watching take place in real time. I think that these former directors of these agencies that have been known to lie to Congress and put out false information, blockade investigations, those people should be held criminally accountable. But that would be up to the Department of Justice. And so I think getting something on the books, again, the UAP Disclosure Act, something with teeth that can actually help push this forward would be huge. And we do have a really small window of opportunity for this specifically because now our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has been one of the biggest voices in this. And a lot of people forget that. And so, I think that I'm proud to say that I'm in the same perspective and mindset as Secretary Rubio on this topic. And so we're going to be continuing to push on our end. But I think that you will find a lot of our investigations to be interesting. So don't pay attention to the naysayers. It's a very small group of weirdos anyways that are saying anything about it. So we'll deliver.
Okay. Well, we know you only have a couple minutes left. So I want to ask you one last question on this, which is a very simple one, but it's a big one. If you have to say briefly why this is important to your constituents, to the American citizenry, and also to the world. I mean, why is this important? Why do you work on it? Why have you devoted part of your political career and expended political capital on this?
Well, there's first and foremost, speaking directly to my constituents, there's actually a large number of sightings in our area specifically. And so people in my community have reported it. People in my community have experienced it. So I've been on a number of occasions reached out to by directly my constituents on the topic. But then in addition to that, there is this aspect of, what is this tech? Is this our tech? Is this, extraterrestrial intelligence tech? Is this interdimensional? What is this specifically? And can we figure it out? Because I think the whole idea of gaslighting people into, saying that that's not what you think it is, when in actuality, many people are seeing and saying, I don't know, this doesn't really look right. But then also too, we have to understand that, in the event, as Dr. Avi Loeb is putting forward, that there is life, is it not our obligation to try to at least inform the public on that? I mean, do we really think that we are the only life form in the galaxies? I doubt it. And so this, I think, can get into a very different and deep topic. And I think I went there recently with Joe Rogan, but, I'm not afraid to have the conversations. I just think that to discredit it and to poo-poo it is the easiest solution, but the most difficult thing is to ask questions and to investigate and find answers.
Yeah, and I should add to that within the scientific community, there is willingness to invest billions of dollars in the search for microbes. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I find microbes much more boring than intelligent beings. If you look down the street and you say, okay, the houses on my street have microbes in them, it's very challenging to see them at a distance. However, if there is a resident that may visit your front door, or that threw a tennis ball to your backyard, or has some construction in their backyard, we might be able to see it more easily. So the fact that microbes are more prevalent doesn't mean that we need to invest all federal funds on the search for microbes. That's completely acceptable within the narrative of the mainstream within science. I find that really strange, given that the public cares so much about intelligence out there. Another way to say it is we really need to find intelligence out there because it's not very common in academia.
That's good, Avi. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congresswoman. We really appreciate your time.
Perfect. We'll be in touch soon.
Our upcoming symposium in Italy is taking place in late October. Registration is still open for that. And you can simply go to thesoulfoundation.org to register. We have many speakers. People are going to want to engage in person. My co-founder, Gary Nolan, Admiral Tim Gallaudet, retired Colonel Carl Nell, a number of scientists from Europe. So please register and join us. And also, if you want to support public education of this kind, public communication of this kind, and also research on UAP, consider joining as a member of the Soul Foundation. That can also be done on our website, thesoulfoundation.org.